Of course.
Right.
Here we go.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Legend of Cold Heroes. Tales of Cold Heroes. Oh, goddammit. I am all fucked up now. Legend of Heroes, Tales of Cold Heroes, whatever. Fucking. And, last time, Lord would go absolutely apeshit as there's a giant azure barrier over the fucking old schoolhouse. And we are immediately about to go and destroy it, or else the school festival will be canceled. It's kind of silly when you put it that way. If that is the final dungeon and that's our big reason for doing it. But it's goofy in a fun way, and it looks like we're going to learn a lot of lore as we go through that place. However, now is not a time for that. Now is a time to read books. Anton and Ricky, let me read in your room here. Let's read Red Moon Rose together.
It's my turn.
Of course.
It's my turn.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Emma, you love books. Let's read with you. Chapter 5. Farewell. Oh, I have to. There we go. Yo, battle prize. Welcome to the stream.
So this is the culprit behind the vampire murders, you say?
Gerard peered at the sketch, brows drawn down. The morning after Alphonse and Rose had fought the vampire, he had made sure to report that fact to Gerard. The sketch Gerard was studying had been outlined based on Alphonse's testimony. It was different. I made note of it several times. Everyone was in their show outfits. It depicted a figure dressed in all black with the upper face obscured. The portrait showed everything Alphonse could recall of the vampire's distinguishing features, and he hoped that would be helpful to the army's investigations. Naturally, he had left out how the suspect is already actually a vampire and capable of turning itself into black smoke on a whim. Having his commanding officer think him crazy would help no one. The purpose of the sketch was simply to help people watch out for the culprit, not to try and convince them of its true nature after all. He did wish he could tell them the complete truth, if only to better prepare them for a potential encounter against the monster and help them more effectively hunt it. But he knew better than anyone that an ordinary human would be able to stand up to it. He had learned that much firsthand the previous night. Trying to fight the vampire would only lead to unnecessary fatalities, and organizing large teams to try and exterminate it could even lead to it hiding itself away, or worse, fleeing the capital and going elsewhere. As such, the best chance to defeat it once and for all seemed to lie with Rose. Gerard straightened and fixed Alphonse with a concerned eye.
Anyway, I'm just glad that you and Luca are both alright.
Then he let out a relieved sigh, as if that genuinely was the most important thing to him. I wonder, because is it really him? Because there it seems like it's not. The description and portrait of the black-clad man would be used to encourage people to be more vigilant and watch out for the culprit. If the number of people going out at night were to decrease, the number of murders would likely decrease too. Gerard tried to convince Alphonse to rest for the day, not least because he had been injured the previous night, but Alphonse had no intention of listening. He and Rose had already decided to meet up and investigate further, he insisted. Gerard's brows ascended once again after that. His parting words as Alphonse left his office were simply,
Let's don't do anything to put yourself in unnecessary danger, alright?
while he was unusually strict as his superior, It was obvious that he genuinely cared for him like a real son. A fact that Alphonse couldn't possibly be any more grateful for. See, like, why did he spare Alphonse? If he is the culprit. Like, why did he raise him, too? I'm guessing he wants to turn Alphonse into a vampire eventually? If that's the case, I don't know. Feeling newly motivated, he quietly muttered to himself,
I will stop these murders.
As he walked toward the exit of the guardhouse. Just before he could set up for his meeting with Rose, however, he encountered his fellow soldier, Elroy. The other man looked as glum as ever. Judging by his appearance, he had just finished this morning's training. Beads of sweat ran down his face, and his hair was matted to his forehead. Despite this, he didn't seem the slightest out of breath. Elroy had always been that way. Though he never seemed to train more than Alphonse and the other team members, he always seemed significantly stronger and more capable than any of them. He was well aware of this fact too, and seemed to develop a sense of superiority because of it. Looking down his nose at the others was Elroy's signature move. Today seemed no different. He turned to Alphonse with a mocking smile on his face.
So, you ran into the culprit behind these so-called vampire murders, did you? Yeah, I did.
Elroy gave a contemptuous snort.
Well, you're useless then, aren't you? Why didn't you catch him? This would all have been over if you had.
As usual, Elroy wasted no time trying to pick a fight with Alphonse, but this time he had no comeback. Elroy was right. If he hadn't been so weak, he would have been able to defeat the vampire and stop the murders the previous night. Seeing Alphonse's reaction to his provocation, Elroy folded his arms triumphantly.
The commander might favor you, but I think it's about time you stop letting that get to your head and learned your place.
Alphonse was about to retort when he noticed something. Elroy's left arm was wrapped tightly in several layers of bandages.
What happened to your arm?
Alphonse pointed the bandages with his finger. And for a brief moment, Elroy seemed unsure how to respond.
That? It's nothing really. I just heard it in training earlier.
Spots of blood peeked through the bandages, making it clear it was a recent injury at the very least. Alphonse looked at the damage with concern.
This is why I can't stand you.
So they're really trying to imply that it's Elroy. I don't know. I still think he might be a red herring. It seems a bit too early in the story for that. I don't know. Apparently thrown off by his teammates' worry, Elroy gave an audible tut before walking away, leaving a slightly embarrassed Alphonse behind. While they were hardly on the best terms, Alphonse didn't bear any particular grudge against Elroy. It was clear that the same couldn't be said for the other man, but Alphonse had no idea what he had against him. Letting out a sigh, he returned his thoughts to the investigation at hand. Now wasn't the time to be thinking about Elroy. He had to focus. With a shake of the head, he opened the guardhouse door and set out to meet Rose. They didn't want the book to actually have 30 chapters. So they did this, like, chapters within the chapters. Still fucking hilarious. They decided to continue their search where they left off, so that the scene of the fourth murder that Alphonse met Rose. Despite scouring the area as thoroughly as they could, however, they found nothing that would help them identify the criminal. Eventually, Rose stopped to think for a while, proposing that they made their way to the street where they encountered the vampire the previous night and searched the scene there. Alphonse agreed. It seemed like a completely different place during the day. Still quiet that had marked the night had been replaced with cheerful chatter and the bustling of people examining the wares at street stalls. Since the murders were known to happen at night, people seemed happy to go about their ordinary lives during the day without a worry in the world. Taking care to avoid standing out too much, they walked side by side around the street looking for potential leads.
It's hard to believe we fought a vampire here last night.
Rose's lips curled up slightly. Most would find it difficult enough to believe vampires exist to begin with. I suppose that makes the existence of people like me, who live to hunt those vampires, more unbelievable still. Was that meant as a joke? Alphonse wondered. Yeah, seriously. Unsure how to respond, he elected to remain silent. Unfazed, Rose set about analyzing the previous night's events. The scent given off by that vampire was the same as the one I sensed from all the victims. At the very least, it seemed beyond a doubt that that vampire is the killer we've been searching for.
His scent?
Alphonse asked, before recalling that Rose mentioned something similar earlier when they were trying to pursue the vampire the previous night. So if we follow that scent, we can find out who the
vampire is.
Rose shook her head. I'm afraid not. As I said before, vampires are only capable of using their powers at night. During the day, they're no different than ordinary humans, and accordingly, the scent that gives them away at being a vampire vanishes as well. They both knew that ideally, the best way to defeat the vampire would be strike during the day, when it was unable to activate its powers. But without any clues to the vampire's identity, they didn't have any chance of doing so. Realizing anew just how difficult the work of a vampire hunter must be, Alphonse admired Rose all the more for being able to cope with it. Nonetheless, we made contact with the vampire yesterday, and I believe it's a big step forward for this investigation. After all, the more fierce the battle, the greater the chance that one of the participants may leave behind some incriminating evidence. There's also the possibility that she may have seen something too. Alphonse assumed that she was referring to Luca. He made a reply, but Rose was no longer alongside him. Turning around, he realized that she had stopped in her tracks some distance behind. Her face was expressionless as ever, but her eyes were cast downwards, almost as if she was regretting something.
What's wrong?
It's nothing, she briskly said and moved on. We should continue our search. What did she realize? God damn it. They set about combing the street, putting remnants of the battle. At one point, Rose suggested they split up to cover a wider area, but even after doing so and reconvening to discuss their findings, or lack thereof, they found themselves no closer to pinpointing the vampire's true identity than they were the previous day. The hour had grown late and the sun was beginning its slow descent in the sky. The warm glow of its fading rays deepened the red hue of the bricks, even as the shadows cast by their sturdy walls lengthened. Alphonse ground his teeth in frustration.
All this searching and not a single result. Damn it!
Rosa said the vampire's power had been increasing over time. The previous night's battle had shown that she was capable of competing with it for now. And it was that fact that allowed them to... Oh, welcome to the stream, Chithaka. Save Luca. But there was no guarantee that would always be the case if he continued to claim more victims and grow stronger. Seeing Alphonse's vexation over their lack of progress, Rose spoke. Nothing will come of being too hasty. We each have our tasks. All we need to do is complete them. He nodded, knowing full well that she was right, but it was hard not to feel bitter about their lack of headway all the same. As he needed to go and report the results of the day's investigation to Gerard, they agreed to part ways for the time being. Alphonse proposed that they meet again at the tavern, like they had the previous day, but Rose refused this offer. I'm afraid I have business I must attend to with the church.
Oh, okay. I was really hoping we'd be able to patrol and keep an eye out for the vampire again, though, since you're the only one who can sense its presence.
Considering what happened the previous night, and the increasing occurrence of the murders, remaining vigilant for the vampire was of utmost priority. Or at least, that was Alphonse's thought on the matter. Rose didn't react to the disappointment in his trailing words. Instead, she merely replied that she'd watch out for it alone, before excusing herself with a solemn farewell. She figured something out. God damn it. There was a pause in which it seemed that she wanted to say something else, but then she curtsied deeply and disappeared from his sight. Alphonse watched her go with an uneasy feeling in his gut. Something seemed off about her behavior. Unable to work out what it was, however, he was left with no choice but to watch her walk away into the distance. Another chapter! That night, Alphonse made his way to the tavern after giving his report to Gerard. Rosemary refused to offer to meet there, but he someone to look on Luca after arriving the previous day. Oh, hello, Alfie! Luca was quick to spot him, and she showed him a seat at the empty counter. After scoring his earlier bill from the dinner with Rose, with the tavern owner, Luca excitedly came over to take his order. Seeing her smile and chatter as energetically as ever, Alphonse felt relieved. He had been expecting and fearing a more subdued demeanor from her. Watching her, he could not but think of how close she came to losing her life, and for a pathetic reason like feeding a vampire. Just the thought made his blood boil. Hello, Kirby. Welcome to the stream. Alfie? Are you okay? Her nervous question made him realize that his anger must be showing in his expression. He quickly put an awkward smile and set about eating to avoid having to explain anything. After a few bites, he felt himself calming down and gave her a more generous smile.
I'm fine, honestly. But never mind me. You haven't managed to recall anything about what happened last night, have you?
She shook her head. Sorry. I wish I could, but I can't remember a thing. He hadn't really expected her to, but he was still slightly disappointed not to be able to gather any new information. Rose had speculated that the shock of seeing the vampire had caused her to subconsciously break out black any memory of what happened. As such, it didn't seem particularly likely that she would be able to help them find out the identity of the vampire either. He sighed. Luca, meanwhile, was desperately trying to remember something, anything, that would allow her to be of service to him. After mulling it over for a time, she suddenly let out an "ah" sound. It doesn't directly relate to what happened yesterday, but that person you know was here earlier. On her own, too. Alphonse was momentarily puzzled.
Who do you mean?
You know, Luca prompted with a switch of her hair. The girl you were with yesterday? Is she investigating Luca? It's possible. But that would imply that Luca is also a vampire. Unless some illusion shit was at work. I don't know. It suddenly dawned on him who Luca was referring to. But Rose had specifically told him that she wouldn't be coming to the tavern today because she had business with the church. A troubled feeling began to build in the pit of his stomach. Anyway, she just came and asked me a few things about yesterday. I couldn't remember anything when she asked either, but eventually she seemed satisfied and then just said, "Farewell," and left.
Farewell.
The moment Alphonse heard those words, it dawned on him. Oh, is she gonna take care of the vampire herself? Every time he parted ways with Rose, she always left with a "farewell for now." But not today. When they separated earlier, she had simply said, "farewell." He had thought something seemed off about her at the time, and it was then that he realized the reason. That was the reason. After that, she must have come to the tavern, where she was able to discover something from Luca. But if that were the case, what would she try to do next? Alphonse fairly jumped out of his seat, half the food still left on his plate, and dumped enough near to pay for the meal hurtling on the table. How? Luca goggled at him. Goggled?
Just keep the change.
It was his second feeling of great foreboding in 2 days, and the first had been downright deadly. He rushed out of the tavern as fast as his legs would carry him on the streets of Heimdall. The sun had long since set, and the deeply shadowed streets welcomed into their murky depths. Ooh, my god, that took a half hour to read one chapter. Oh my god, and yep, another chonker, 26 pages. How many chapters are there again? Okay, 14. We're not even halfway there. Chapter 6, Bloodstained Rose. Uh-oh. City of Heimdall was deathly silent. During the day, word had been spread through the populace from the garage team regarding the culprit behind the vampire murders. Knowing specific details about the perpetrator instilled an even greater sense of fear into the people of the city, making them even more wary of stepping out of their homes at night. That the streets would be empty was an inevitability, and yet, on one dark avenue in the city, a petite woman walked alone, as if to defy all of that. She wore a plain, undecorated dress, and from all appearances belonged to the middle class. She walked quite quickly. The sound of her shoes against the ground, echoing loudly in the empty streets. Her arms were wrapped tightly around her chest, almost as if embracing herself, and she was hunched forward, clearly afraid of something. Of course, it was perfectly natural for her to be afraid, considering that the majority of victims of the city's serial murder were young women like herself. She looked around restlessly, carefully surveying her surroundings for signs of danger before disappearing down a dark alleyway. The faint moonlight illuminated her profile as she turned the corner and cast a long shadow behind her, which slowly and silently began to enlarge. Gradually, the silhouette extended upwards, the inky depths taking the shape of a man. It loomed behind her. Ooh! The figure was swathed in all in black, with the top half of its face covered. The bottom half remained exposed, revealing a wicked grin and sharp, pointed fangs. It was a vampire, a creature of legend. It stood silently behind the woman, very much real despite its supposed mythological standing. From the sable folds of the cloak swaddling its body, it slowly extended a pale hand. The fingers stretched forward. Sharp, pointed nails gently swept aside the woman's shoulder, length blonde hair. The tips brushed the back of her neck almost caressingly. The second they did, though, it seemed to sense that something was wrong. Its prey was behaving oddly. Rose is luring him in. Hadn't expected the frail creature before to put up slightest resistance. She should have frozen at its touch, or given in to despair, having no choice but to succumb to the inevitable and have her blood drained. What it felt from her instead, however, was defiance and danger. This woman was no prey. Hunter had met Hunter. Hunter. The creature tensed, ready to leap backward. Too late, it realized another threat radiated from directly beside it. There was no avoiding it. Sound of paving stones cracking resounded in the still night. Its outstretched right arm was suddenly shredded by numerous sharp objects. A bomb? The vampire let out an involuntary hiss of pain as a wave of silver blades arced through the air and flesh, one after another. But the attack wasn't over. Sounds like he's being hit by shrapnel. The vampire sensed danger from below, too, and the blades which impaled the ground suddenly arced upwards with alarming speed, as if retracing their path through the air. Oh, it's like boomerang blades. Just as the blades were about to sever its right arm from its body once and for all, it was able to shove out of the way. Clutching its mangled limb, the vampire edged further back to put the distance between itself and the woman. It watched balefully with narrowed eyes. As the razor sharp segments that had pierced it soared back over the bladeless handle in the woman's hand, when she had drawn it didn't know. So it is a boomerang blade. Damn! Connected by sturdy steel wires, segments interlocked one. Oh, no, never mind. It's a chain sword. Whoa. Okay, so she is a member of the church. Okay, so yeah. Complete blade known as the Templars. Yeah, this is Reese's sword, I believe. She swung it, shaking the blood from its surface. Every last trace of the weakness she had shown earlier, when hurrying through the night, was gone. She turned around finally, revealing the dignified, expressionless face that had lain on the other side of the sleek blonde curtain of hair. It was the vampire hunter Rose.
So you were trying to lure me out, were you? Such cunning.
The vampire sneered. Its words were sharp, but the delivery fell somewhat tremulously on the rough cobblestones of the empty alley. You flatter me, Rose said. Her Templar sword still raised in her right hand. She put her left hand in her pocket and pulled out an unbelievably large caliber pistol, greater in size than those used in the army. So, Trail's land had guns for a while. Interesting. Huh. She aimed it at the vampire's forehead and pulled the trigger without a moment's hesitation. The gunpowder flashed and illuminated the alleyway briefly. A single blessed silver bullet flew from the muzzle with merciless intent. Such was the force of the discharge that an ordinary person's shoulder would have been dislocated. But Rose didn't so much as twitch. The vampire moved with liquid speed, dodging the projectile just in time and slipping behind Rose. Damn! She should have known it was only Chapter 6. Dodging the projectile just in time and slipping behind Rose. Not the slightest perturbed by its change in direction, Rose moved as well and kept the pistol focused on the creature, tracking the vampire's every movement. You're quite adept at fleeing, if nothing else, she said coolly.
Would you prefer I did something like this, then?
The vampire asked. As it spoke, it flooded the black garments it was draped in and then began to expand. The folds stretching to impossible size before her eyes. Pitiful moans echoed in the dark depths. Rose watched with narrowed eyes and as a number of ghouls crawled out from within, emerging from thin air. 5, 6, 7. Uh-oh. Eventually, she counted 10 in all. It hadn't even been 24 hours since her previous battle. The vampire couldn't possibly have attacked that many people in that time. Rose's mouth tightened. I see. And here we believe the reported murders to be the only victims. But that wasn't the case at all. You were abducting others who had no living relatives to notice that they were gone, and keeping them locked up somewhere, weren't you? Damn.
Precisely. With a vampire hunt on the loose, I had to make sure I had some food in reserve. I'd rather not run the risk of going hungry, you see.
Oof. The very thought makes me physically ill, Rose replied quietly. With a vicious yank, she tore the dress she had worn as a disguise from her body. Underneath its sturdy leather clothes, designed with mobility in mind, were revealed. Attached to them were numerous belt-holding large guns, knives, and other anti-vampire weaponry in place. Ah, the music's going in and going all jazzy. I could hear it. It was clear at a glance that she was well prepared for battle. Sight of Rose's arsenal cooked a sickly smile for the vampire.
Go forth, my minions.
And with a wave of its pallid hand, the ghouls leapt forward.
Where are you, Rose?
Alphon shouted between pants as he ran back and forth across the city, desperately searching for her. My God! If the previous books were novellas, this is legitimately just a straight up novel. Like, what the actual hell? With the length of the story here. Hold on 1 second. Just getting a bit of honey. Hello, Uptis, and welcome to the stream. Try as he might, though, he could find no sign of the blonde woman. Even his fellow soldiers patrolling the streets had seen nothing. Alphonse had a very specific reason for pursuing this case, and he didn't intend to lose this opportunity to put the past behind him. That was what led him to propose that he and Rose work together, a proposal which she had accepted. And yet, despite all of that, she was trying to fight the vampire all on her own. It was too risky even for her. His mind was full of worry for her, and that fear conjured forth the image of his parents' dead bodies. Never again. He never wanted to see a sight like that again. Wishing over and over that Rose was still all right, he raced on, and it was then that he heard a sound that caught his attention. The clash of a battle. Uh-oh. Something tells me that the vampire is going to take him hostage as a way to escape. As soon as the noise reached his ears, he quickly surveyed his surroundings. The source seemed to be an alleyway nearby. Without a thought spared for his own safety, he charged into the alleyway. There, an unbelievable sight met his eyes. Two ghouls lunged at her, sheathing her Templar sword into its scabbard. Rose drew a second large pistol in its place. The ghouls swung their fists and ragged nails toward her with inhuman power. But she dodged them gracefully. As she spun out of their range, she aimed one pistol at each ghoul's forehead and pulled the trigger simultaneously. Flesh and bone were obliterated instantly. The sheer force of the blast sent the mangled remains somersaulting backwards through the air. The move left Rose slightly unbalanced. And, as if seeking to take advantage of that, 3 more ghouls flew at her from outside her field of vision. The mere sound of their movement was enough to alert her, however, and without even turning to face them, she sent 2 more bullets to the heads of the 2 ghouls chasing her from the sides. The 3rd ghoul's mouth distended, seeking to crush Rose's skull with its teeth. But she danced out of reach, holstering the pistols. Damn, she's like fucking Bayonetta here. Fluidly, she then flipped back through the air, drawing her Templar sword at the same time and slicing the lower half of the ghoul's body from the upper half in one swift stroke. She landed gracefully and kicked the ghoul she had just cut in half out of the way, without even waiting for its body to hit the ground. Two more ghouls approached from the fringes. But without waiting for them to draw closer this time, she swung her blade horizontally through the air. It split into pieces, and the countless segmented parts pierced the ghouls' necks. Their heads dropped to the ground like fruit falling from a tree. 7 of the ghouls incapacitated in what seemed like an instant. Rose turned her attention to the defiantly grinning vampire, and the remaining 3 ghouls with him. Damn, he has a lot of minions! She drew the 2 pistols from around her waist a second time and sprinted towards them, showering them with the remaining loaded bullets. The vampire evaded the projectiles by using the remaining ghouls as shields. Out of bullets, Rose drew her Templar sword and swung in the direction of the vampire's neck in one fluid motion, seeking to decapitate it. The next instant, the high-pitched screech of metal against metal filled the air. The vampire had drawn its own weapon from inside the black garments. It met Rose's blade in midair. The 2 swords locked against one another, filling the air with sparks and leaving them in a stalemate, reminiscent of the previous night's battle.
I'm impressed at how unfazed you are. You seem fighting against those ghouls.
The vampire said, teeth bared but with a slight curl to his lips.
I would have expected a human to at least hesitate when being forced to fight their own kind.
They ceased to be my kind the moment you drank their blood. They had nothing but soulless puppets now. Why should I hesitate against them? The creature inclined its head almost respectfully at that.
You certainly think like a vampire hunter.
The sound of metal against metal continued to reverberate throughout the area. Drinking the blood of the ghouls had allowed the vampire to become even stronger than the previous night. Its once crippled right arm had already healed and regained its original form. Okay, that confirms it then. That confirms it. If he can regen that badly, then that quickly, then Alroy is 100% a red herring. It's gotta be Gerard. Even so, Rose met it without any sign of strain, her strength matching that of the fellow creature before her. Ah! The loud war cry split the air, startling both combatants, and a third figure suddenly burst into. Oh, that was Alphonse. Ah! Charging figure was dressed in an army uniform and brandished a silver sword. It was Alphonse. Catching the vampire off guard, he slashed at its side. Having no experience with the weapon itself, it was a shallow attack, and the damage it dealt, far from lethal, was enough to break the stalemate. Oh, nice. He actually did help. Hold on a second. That is so cool. Usually when the more inexperienced character comes to help out, it usually fucks things up. Catching the vampire off guard, okay, shall attack, and the lethal enough to break the stalemate. Seizing the opening, Rose forcefully knocked the vampire's sword out of the way, and in one flowing motion slashed horizontally from exposed chest to its left arm. A crimson gout of blood arced from the wound, splashing the cobblestones. Something also sheared off from within the vampire's garments and flew into the air. Ah, that's a clue. Yo, who's she walking in the stream? The vampire clutched his chest in pain, but it was clear that her attack had only grazed it. It seemed that once again the creature's preternatural speed had saved it from mortal injury. Eyes darting from one to the other, it backed away with an audible tch.
It looked like the odds are stacked against me. I will retreat for today,
It said. Its outline growing dim. Forward turned to mist and vanished into nothingness. After a moment of heavy silence, Alphonse sheathed his sword, staring at the spot where the vampire had previously been.
It got away again.
Finally looking at him, Rose let out a sigh of disbelief. Why did you come? Hearing the coldness in her voice. Why did you come? Alphonse lost his composure. He seized her shoulders in his hands. Oh my god, Alphonse! Too much riz, man.
Of course I came!
He yelled.
What were you thinking trying to fight him on your own? It's too dangerous to take him on without help!
Her cool blue eyes blocked with his. Dangerous? For me? Do you honestly believe that? She asked. Her face was as mask-like as ever. But her tone had dropped from chilly to downright glacial. It had a cooling effect on Alphonse's anger. He took a half step back and looked at her from top to bottom. Illuminated from the light of the moon, he could see that she was covered in gore. He released his shoulders and stared down at his own hands. They too were now wet with blood from touching her, and yet there was not so much as a scratch on her whole body. The filth covering her entirely belonged to the ghoul she defeated. I am a vampire hunter, and this is not the first vampire I've hunted. I have killed more of them than you could possibly imagine. Alphonse couldn't deny what she was saying. He had seen for himself the skill and grace she had shown in mercilessly slaying all the ghouls, unmoved by the fact that they were once humans. She had been an artist in battle on the sword or paintbrush. Ryoshi would like it. But what he had witnessed was beyond his comprehension. A struggle between monsters rather than human beings. Is she like half vampire or something? I wonder. Like, it feels like she has some supernatural abilities as well. That was why he could do nothing but stand and watch at first, unable to intervene. He was lost for words. Rose broke the silence with a short, frosty laugh. Al, I have no further need of your assistance. I suggest you forget all about all of this and return to your ordinary life. She then gave a respectful curtsy, much like the one she had met when they first met. Okay, I'm thinking that she figured out that it's Gerard, and that she doesn't want Alphonse to be hurt by this revelation, so she's gonna go and kill him herself. And that's why she's being cold right now. Chapter 7, Parting of the Ways. I have no further need of your assistance. His mind still reeling from the skill that Rose had demonstrated in her earlier battle. The only way he could react to her words was with dumbfounded silence. There were plenty of ways he could have argued back. Not least by pointing out that they had yet to discover the vampire's identity. And the reason she had originally agreed to work together was so he could use his position in the army to aid her in doing so. As if reading his mind, she said, I discovered the identity of the vampire this afternoon. As such, there is no longer anything you can do to help me. His initial reaction was doubt. How could she have possibly been the one to discover the vampire's identity when they conducted their investigation together? But then it hit him. They hadn't always been together. They had split up to investigate a wider area today, too. Now, she had discovered a vital clue during a period where they were acting separately. It made perfect sense that only she would have worked out the truth. He tried again.
But still, I have my reasons for wanting to see this through to the end, too. I can't just go back to living as if none of this ever happened.
Rose knew this already, of course. He had told her about his parents' murder once already, and made her realize the two cases might be connected. She sighed, her reaction making it perfectly clear that pointing that out would do nothing to change her mind. She met his eyes again, unwavering the slightest, and as she said, Then allow me to put my position to you more bluntly. You are not a help, you are a hindrance. Damn. Yeah, she's really trying to get him out of the way. It was as if a sharp blade had pierced his chest. Her words left him shocked and speechless. She continued. I would have thought that anyone who looked around would be able to realize that this is not a matter that ordinary people can or should involve themselves in. As she spoke, she gestured in the direction of the ghouls, or rather human corpses that were once ghouls littering the surrounding area. Some were riddled with bullet holes, some with smashed skulls, some had no heads at all. Her words caused Alphonse's memory to return once again to the battle he had witnessed. Even if he had tried to intervene earlier than he did, would he have been able to do anything? No. On the contrary, it was easier to imagine him getting in Rose's way, becoming a liability and interfering with her ability to fight. But he didn't, though. He didn't. He actually helped out. Alphonse looked down to the ground dejectedly. It was galling to hear and realize that he might be useless in this. Rose opened her mouth to continue, her gaze somewhat distant. A long time ago, I tried to pursue another vampire with the help of a civilian just like you. I was hesitant at first, but after he insisted so vehemently, I eventually accepted. I wonder if that's Alphonse's dad. Alphonse looked up, stunned at what he was hearing. He had assumed he was the first person to offer to his sister. He was killed by the very vampire we were pursuing. After that, the vampire disappeared, never to be seen again. It was clear by the pain in her voice that for someone whose life revolved around killing vampires, there could have been no worse outcome. Of all the jobs I had undertaken, that was my worst failure, and the most terrible stain on my record. I would not allow something like that to happen again. As such, I have always tried to keep you at arm's length. All I wanted from you was for you to make it easier for me to conduct my investigation, and find out what I wanted to know. I was just using you all along. Ah, we know that's not true. This is a classic. It is a classic bit. Give it up, Rose. I've seen this bit 10 trillion times. She continued on, telling him that everything had gone the way she hoped it would, perhaps even better. Thanks to his contribution, she had been able to discover the identity of the vampire, and the army was able to find out what it looked like, helping them keep people off the streets and allowing her to successfully lure the vampire out. For that, at the very least, she was grateful. Alphonse could only stand and listen as her cold words washed over him. The meaning of what she was actually saying not truly sinking in. She fell silent for a moment and took a deep breath before starting again. The worlds we live in are just too different. We should never have even met. And yet by coincidence we did. But that's all. Now you need to forget that it ever happened and go back to the life you should have always lived. Besides, as a vampire hunter, the only life for me is one of solitude. She gave a small, self-deprecating smile before turning to walk away from him. Seeing that smile and hearing what she said, something struck Alphonse off. And yet he could not call out to her, as if there was an impenetrable wall between them now. One could say a barrier! I can take care of everything by myself for now. All I ask of you is to stay and let me do it. Farewell. She said her final words as she walked, without so much as turning to face him, and then disappeared. Into the dark night. Left behind, Alphonse stood alone, frozen in the spot in a sea of blood. The next day, 10 unidentified bodies were discovered in Heimdall, and the surrounding area filled with disorder, the likes of which had never been seen before. Numerous soldiers moved to and fro, surveying the area under guard's direction, while crowds of curious onlookers tried to get a closer look at the gruesome display. Even Alphonse, who had been removed from the main investigation team, had been called in to assist this time. Alphonse suspected the bodies to be heavily disfigured from Rose's attacks, but when he reached the scene, he could see no evidence whatsoever that the previous night's battle had even taken place. Only marks on the bodies were the bite marks left by the vampire. At first, that fact confused him, but then he remembered that Rose was somehow connected to the church. It seemed quite possible, then, that she would have worked alongside others, one or more of whom had already arrived later, disguising the evidence of their arrival. After all, the church had the ability to purify weapons to allow them to contend with vampires. Possibility that they might also be able to put corpses back together was hardly a stretch after all the things he had already witnessed. Realizing how ludicrous that would sound to the average person, he could only laugh to himself under his breath. There was no sign of Rose at the scene, although Alphonse hadn't really expected that she would appear to begin with. She had made it clear that the previous night that their original arrangement was over. Most likely, Rose would go on to bring an end to the vampire murders herself in secret. Yeah, they sent the cleanup crew. I was thinking also LCCA. Oh my god. With the culprit never apprehended, and the fact that vampires actually existed never being revealed to the world. But could he live with everything ending that way? There was still one burning down Alphonse's heart. A lingering unease that refused to go away. The expression on her face that she has turned to walk away. As a vampire hunter, the only life for me is one of solitude. That may have been what she said, but the sad smile on her lips when she did so told a different story. Coolness underlined resignation. Her words had been blunt, but to Alphonse they also seemed tinged with loneliness. Alphonse found himself reflecting on what loneliness meant to him. It was a feeling he was all too familiar with after losing his parents. In the blink of an eye, he had been left with no one who cared for him, no one who would be kind to him, no one who would look after him. It was easy to imagine how being in place in a situation like that would gradually eat away at a person. Fortunately for Alphonse, his father's friend Gerard had left out a hand of salvation to him, and he had later met others like Luca who cared for him, and he for them. It was thanks to them that he was able to free himself of this loneliness that may have otherwise consumed him. Nonetheless, the experience had taught him exactly how painful living like that could be, and that humans could not completely live alone. Rather, Rose, however, had said that living in solitude was the only life for her. But did she honestly mean that, or did she really long to break free from it? Something was stopping her from doing so. With the memory of his own experience still painful even after all those years, Alphonse couldn't stop wondering. That was when he made up his mind. He wouldn't just leave things as they were. Roseman had cast him aside, but he had long ago decided he knew what he needed to do with the past behind him. And no matter how much danger he risked doing it, or how much he tried to stop him, he was determined to see it through to the end. If that meant he might be a hindrance to her, then so be it. This was his fight as much as hers. Alphonse shook his head furiously from side to side, as if to divest himself of the doubts and hesitations that had been filling his mind since the previous night. Focusing on the task at hand, he set about frantically investigating the area. That, he felt, was the only way for him to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with her. Here we go, he's finally gonna find the shit! Time dragged on as the search continued, and receding rays of the setting sun began to blanket the scene in warm apricot hues. The 10 corpses had been carried away, and the vast majority of onlookers had dispersed. The large number of soldiers who formed the investigation team had also reached a stopping point in their investigation and were ready to return for the day. But Alphonse waved them off, still silently combing the area for clues.
Come on now. It's time to go back to the guardhouse for the day.
The concern in Gerard's voice was obvious, but Alphonse only spared him a tired smile.
Sorry, sir. Just let me look around for a bit longer.
Considering the intense battle fought between Rose and the vampire the previous night, there was every chance that something may have been left behind that might help guide him to the vampire's identity. The investigation team had found no such thing despite spending the entire day looking, but that did nothing to dampen Alphonse's spirits. There was something here, he knew it. Seeing Alphonse's determination, Gerard couldn't help but smile in return.
All right then. Have it your way. Just make sure you stop and come back if you get too tired.
And with a backwards wave, he walked off to join the other soldiers that returned to the guardhouse. Silently thanking Gerard for his kindness, Alphonse went back to scouring the alley. Another half hour passed while Alphonse methodically swept his eyes over every nook and cranny. As the light from the dipping sun retreated from the sky, he began to fear his time was up. But just then his eyes were drawn to a point between two of the buildings. It was a narrow gap, overlooked in the investigation, or something might have fallen. Indeed, he spied the barest of shapes sit on the ground. Upon spotting it, Alphonse remembers seeing something fly from the vampire, and Rose had landed her glancing slotch in his chest. He crouched down to inspect the space. The gap between the buildings was so narrow that his arm could barely fit inside. He stretched out his fingers, desperately trying to reach the fallen object, eventually managed to catch it between his index and middle fingers. It was a narrow, rectangular piece of cloth. Alphonse stared at it, analyzing every last detail of its surface. It was filthy gray in color, most likely meaning it had been white originally. It was also clear that it had been separated from something by Rose's sword, but other than that, it looked like an ordinary piece of cloth. It would have been nothing of interest at all to anyone just passing by. Anyone other than Alphonse, that is. Looking at it, he finally understood everything. The reason Rose suddenly chose to part ways with him, and the true identity of the vampire was terrorizing the city. Alright, here we go. Chapter 8. The Truth. Wow, we have so many chapters to go still. Wow, this is the shortest chapter yet, which would be a long chapter for any other Trails book. Damn, that was 3 chapters in an hour. Well, thank you so much, Red Max. Welcome to the stream. Chapter 8, The Truth. The stillness of night came once again to the streets of Heimdall. A bewitching yet eerie red moon hung full in the sky. Oh, it all ends tonight. This is the Red Moon Rose. Its carmine glow staining the red bricks of the surrounding buildings an even deeper crimson. After the gruesome discovery of the bodies that day, the Garrard team had strengthened its nighttime patrols. Most of the soldiers in the team were on the streets, determined to prevent any further violence and repair the damage to the Imperial Army's honor. Their patrol routes had them making tight circuits of the city roads, vigilantly searching for anything out of order. On one particularly dark street corner, a block away from the Algeria Tavern, stood a young man in military uniform. Much like the others, he was making the rounds in his thoroughly deserted patrol area. A figure turning onto the street just ahead of him made him pause mid-step. Wearily, he put his hand on the sword at his waist. As the figure drew closer, features gradually became more visible. It was another soldier like himself. It was Alphonse. Huh. Alphonse stepped forward and stood silently before the other young man. He fixed him with an unwavering gaze.
It's you,
the young man said, sounding annoyed.
What are you doing here? This is my patrol area, not yours.
Oh, no, this is the other dude.
Oh, it's you,
the young man said, sounding annoyed.
What are you doing here? This is my patrol area, not yours.
He glared at Alphonse with intense dislike, but Alphonse did not look away.
I came to ask you something.
Alphonse replied simply. He put his hand into his pocket and took something out of it. It was a dirty piece of cloth. The other man looked puzzled.
What's that supposed to be? It was something I found in the area where that vampire appeared last night. It's also yours, isn't it, Elroy?
Elroy stared back at Alphonse and rolled his eyes. His voice dripped with contempt. Wait, is it really Elroy? He wasn't a red herring? God damn it. It's really just Elroy? Oh, wow. I was really off the mark. So it was that obvious.
What are you talking about? Did you really abandon your post over some rag might belong to? And vampire? You're supposed to be a soldier, not some kind of superstitious lunatic.
He scoffed.
Is this part of the bandage you're wearing around your left arm when you said you were injured in training?
Alphonse said calmly. The cloth, Alphonse continued, must have been cut from his bandage during the previous day's battle. Ended up being between the two buildings in an area they had neglected to check. He didn't, however, mention who had done the cutting. There was no need to tell Elroy information that he already knew, after all. Hearing this, Elroy clutched his left arm, hidden under the sleeve of his army uniform, almost as if trying to hide it from Alphonse.
Besides, the idea that you were injured badly enough to need a bandage like that in standard training makes no sense to begin with. You're the most skilled swordsman on the Garage team, after all. That's not to say you weren't actually injured, especially considering there really was fresh blood on the bandage itself. But you didn't injure yourself during training. You were stabbed by a rapier, and that was the bandage what the bandage was intended to disguise.
Elroy said nothing. Under any other circumstance, he would have been quick to argue back. But not this time. His brow furrowed and glared angrily at Alphonse.
I'm sure that you must have replaced the bandage with a new one last night. But then, what was this doing at the scene of the crime? You weren't involved in this morning's investigation.
Alphonse was aware that what he was saying wouldn't be enough to prove to the world that Elroy was a vampire. They were, after all, creatures of legend. People would never believe him. What it did prove, however, was that Elroy had been where Rose and the vampires' battle took place. And considering that Alphonse already knew that vampires were no mere myth, that was all the proof he needed.
I don't want to believe it myself. I can't bear to think that someone who I served alongside as a soldier, someone more skilled than any of us, is actually a monster who've been indiscriminately murdering people.
Elroy made no reply. He just stared down at the ground, silent and tense.
But I am a member of the Garage team.
Alphonse continued resolutely.
And we are entrusted with the task of protecting this city. I have a duty to do what I can to prevent any more lives from being lost. Unless you can prove that what I'm saying isn't true, I'm going to have to arrest you as a suspect.
Hands at his sides, Elroy let out a short, quiet laugh. The second he did, something changed, and the atmosphere became impressive. Elroy threw back his head and let out a loud, maniacal laugh. It was an inhuman sound, that outburst. The skin-crawling utterance was entirely unlike the usual quiet Elroy, and as his mouth yawned wide, Alphonse saw what he knew he would. Beast fang, like fangs. The fangs of a vampire. I was 150% wrong. Alphonse placed his hand on the saber at his waist and drew it as fast as he could. So there were no herrings. It really was that simple. The blade scraping against the scabbard cut short the awful laugh, but he wasn't fast enough. Before he knew it, Elroy was right in front of him, swinging his own sword with incredible force. Alphonse barely had the time to block its arc with his own. Sound of metal against metal filled the air, and the monstrous strength of the blow pushed Alphonse backwards. It It was obvious to him that Elroy's power was vastly greater than it had been when he took the punch to the stomach several days before. If Elroy had been that strong that day, Alphonse knew he'd already be dead. Barely managed to hold his position. He clung to his saber with his now somewhat numb hand, but the vampire was already drawing back for another strike, planting his feet firmly on the ground. Alphonse was just able to parry the blow, but it's all he could manage. If he straightened even a hair from focusing on defense, he would soon be overwhelmed. Elroy, meanwhile, maintained his onslaught seemingly without effort. Blow after blow rained down relentlessly.
You should have waited, Alphonse. Surely you knew that vampires could only use their powers at night.
Alphonse grunted as he narrowly deflected another attack. Naturally, he did know. He was fully aware that waiting until morning would have actually given him a chance to defeat Elroy, but he couldn't just bring himself to wait. Not when there was a possibility he might have claimed another victim that very night. His conscience wouldn't allow him to sleep peacefully in his bed, knowing he could have done something to stop that murder from happening. As if to punctuate his point, Elroy knocked the saber from Alphonse's hands with a vicious swipe that drove him to his knees. The blade clattered down on the paving stones far from the fighting pair.
You're finished,
Elroy crowed, turning his sword on Alphonse. The blade flashed up, then descended. Alphonse watched the fall of the sword in slow motion. He knew there was nothing he could do to stop it. It bite through his flesh and sent its head soaring through the air, much like a saber had done. Suddenly, a high-pitched whistling sound of something moving very fast cut through the night. And then another, and another followed. The next moment, Elroy's right arm was gone. Ah, she's here to the rescue. Blood speckled Alphonse's cheeks like a fine rain, and just as he had imagined, something soared through the air and hit the ground. But instead of being his head, it was Elroy's right arm. Sword still clutched his rigid fingers.
Drah!
Elroy instinctively jumped back, clutching at his wounded limb, while Alphonse stared wide-eyed at the many parts of a Templar sword stretched before him like the flexing of a metal snake. The wires connecting them razor-sharp blade segments gleamed in the moonlight. A line of tension then ran through the wires, and they all retraced just as fast as they had appeared. Soon after, a lone figure approached to take their place. It was a woman in a navy blue coat that was thrown wide, exposing countless weapons attached to the battle gear she was wearing underneath. She had sleek, shoulder-length blonde hair, capped by a navy blue beret. The look she gave Alphonse when she saw him was somewhat between exasperation and disbelief. Alphonse smiled weakly.
What took you so long, Rose?
Oh, this was chapter 8. Okay. Back to the 20 pages thing again. Chapter 9, a fool. Damn, I was 150% wrong. God damn it. I really thought it was Gerard. Because Elroy, seems super ultra obvious. Man.
So you showed up after all, did you, vampire hunter?
Elroy glared at Rose, teeth clenched in anger and pain. Red smoke was rising from the amputated right arm. It gave off a faint hissing sound. Rose turned her attention from Alphonse to him. She raised her Templar sword and stared without expression at her target. Elroy glowered back. They both maintained a distance from one another. Each trying to work out what the other would do next. Without taking her eyes off Elroy, Rose addressed Alphonse. I told you not to get involved in this any further. and yet despite that you tried to fight a vampire alone. I cannot believe you would do something so foolish. Her words were tinged with anger. Alphonse rose unsteadily to his feet.
You were the one who tried fighting him alone first. And besides, I never had any intention of seriously trying to defeat him by myself.
What? He faced her and spread his hands.
I was pinning all of my hopes on you coming for me. And you did. Just like when we first met.
Ooh. Wow. Damn. Sorry, Luca. Looks like this isn't the first Luca that gets fucking cucked. Oof. Damn, that always pissed me off about Chrono Trigger. Sorry, getting some more honey. Like, seriously. I really thought that Chrono would get with Luca, and he goes with the fucking princess. Come on! Luca was way cooler. Fucking hell, Chrono. God damn it. Alphonse's response seemed to catch Rose completely off guard. He could tell as much even from his position behind her. She quickly regained her composure, though, and the wavering sword steadied. I don't know what you're trying to say.
You told me that you didn't want to work with me anymore because I was getting you away. Because there was nothing more that I could help you with. But that's not the real reason. The real reason is that you didn't want to put me in any more danger. You didn't want me to lose my life helping you like the last person who worked with you did.
That is just idle speculation, she replied coolly. But Alphonse knew he was right.
Then why did you lie about discovering the vampire's true identity?
What? Rose gasped. So you noticed. It hadn't taken much effort to see through her lie. Rose herself had said vampires were only capable of unleashing their powers at night, meaning that the best way to defeat one was to discover their true identity and kill them during the day. And yet despite that, Rose had gone to the effort of trying to lure the vampire out, taking great risks of using herself as bait. Dang. Logically, her actions made no sense whatsoever if she had known the true identity of the creature. Deliberately lowering her chances of success wasn't like Rose at all.
I imagine you noticed something else during our investigation.
Alphonse continued.
I don't know what. But whatever it was, it made you think that letting me cooperate with you any longer would put my life in danger. And that was why you lied, in order to try and keep me away from that danger.
Rose didn't react, but also she didn't deny his words. To Alphonse, that was the same as an admission.
Enough of this!
The vampire before them opened its eyes wide and began to concentrate its power. Oh, he's getting ready for a blood spirit bomb. The moment it did, the red smoke that had been rising from the stump where its arm had been was replaced with a jet of iridescent black ichor. It bubbled and frothed from the open wound on the cobblestone some distance away. The arm itself also began to expel the same noxious-looking secretion. Yeah, magnetism to regenerate. There we go. Suddenly, the black liquid from both stump and severed limbs stretched and pulled, seeking out the other.
No!
Oh, no! Knowing what was about to happen, Rose quickly swung her Templar sword in the direction of the liquid. The sword's countless parts sliced through it, but the dark matter just reformed around the damage. Moments later, the liquid had done its work, and the severed right arm was back where it belonged, as good as new. How could he recover so quickly? I knew it. He really is a... Really is a what? We already know he's a vampire. Elroy swung the sword with his newly attached arm at Rose. Calm as ever, she pointed her Templar sword at him and fired the bladed segments that formed it. They flew from the handle and wrapped around him, blinding and tearing simultaneously. Before they could completely ensnare him, however, Elroy transmuted into mist. The blades of the Templar sword fell from the spot he had been as the mist dispersed. It reconverged a moment later at a point just behind the vampire hunter. No sooner had the mist solidified than Elroy swung the sword. His attack caught her completely off guard, decapitating her. Oh, I was just about to say, what? Or so we expected, but Alphonse blocked it, his saber back in hand. Gah! Alphonse gritted his teeth, desperately trying to hold his ground. Elroy had the clear advantage in terms of strength, but as try as he might, he could not break Alphonse's guard.
How many times do you have to get in my way before you're satisfied?
Cried Elroy. Ow! Seeing a chance, Rose drew one of her giant pistols and, holding it in a backhand grip, pulled the trigger. The bullet ripped through Elroy's shoulder, propelling him backwards. Alphonse steadies himself and ready to save her again.
I won't die on you, Rose. I'm not going to let some vampire kill me, so...
Can this not wait? Oh my god. Rose aimed her pistol, resting it on Alphonse's shoulder, and fired it repeatedly at Elroy. His wound already fully healed, Elroy dodged all of her bullets with snake-like grace and flew at them with great speed. Rose's pistol was now empty of bullets, and the vampire's charge gave her no time to draw the other. Elroy swung his sword at them as if trying to cut them both down in a single stroke. Alphonse brought his own saber to bear and braced with all his might to block the path of the falling sword. The two blades collided with such force that Alphonse's saber was sheared in two. The collision repelled Elroy as well, but if he were to swing his sword downward a second time with the same level of force, Alphonse and Rose would have no chance of surviving. The vampire's lips curled up in a smile, sensing impending victory. That smile was replaced almost immediately by shock when he saw what Alphonse had drawn from the depths of his uniform. Alphonse had expected that his saber would not survive Elroy's attack. And had immediately reached for the silver short sword given to him by Rose.
So, I'm never going to allow you to be alone again!
He cried out as he sunk the silver sword down across Elroy's body, a trail of glittering argent light flowing in its wake. Elroy recoiled backwards, clawing in his chest. Alphonse's attack had missed his heart, but the damage it had done was the greatest he'd received yet.
How could I be wounded by the likes of him? Damn you, damn you, damn you, damn you!
Elroy's expression was one of pure hatred mixed with intense agony. There wasn't a trace of humanity left on his face. Alphonse, meanwhile, had exhausted the last of his strength with that attack and was on his knees out of breath. Rose stared down at him, a peculiar look on her face. Alphonse was desperately trying to accept and understand her solitude. He recognized the intense loneliness she had been burdened with when she let her companion die all these years ago, trying to save her from it. The words,
I'm never going to allow you to be alone again!
resounded in her head over and over. She knew that what he had said was purely based on emotion, but it was enough to fill her heart with warmth. Heart that she had thought long gone cold. Ah. Oh my god, poor Luca. Oh my god, she would have every right to be paranoid about Rose.
You really are a complete fool.
She laughed. The sound of her laughing so naturally was enough to make Alphonse snap around and stare at her. Hello, Lestat. Welcome to the stream.
But perhaps that isn't such a bad thing after all, she said with a small smile.
What is this goggled? That is not a verb. It's like the second time I've seen it now. Goggled. What the fuck does that mean? Isn't it giggled? It was Rose, and yet it felt like he had never seen this woman before in his life. The warmth, the gentle smile.
What's that supposed to mean?
He stammered. Feeling as though he'd seen something he should not have, Alphonse turned around again, flustered. Ellery was now back in his direct view. Seems like this is the end of the story. The vampire was still in the same spot, watching motionless. Alphonse had already forgotten about him. Almost forgotten about him. Yeah, that's Google, not, I've never heard of goggle used as a verb. Now was hardly the time to be talking with Rose. He needed to finish off the vampire, Elroy, for good. He looked back at Rose and they nodded to one another. Rosa began to walk towards Elroy, leaving the exhausted Alphonse behind. Elroy remained still, his head bowed, mumbling something absentmindedly to himself. Rose pointed a remaining pistol at his head. All that she needed to do was pull the trigger and it would be all over. But she didn't. She stopped, confused. Something wasn't right. What? What's going on? Oh, he was just a minion. He was a lower kindred, wasn't he?
The scent is gone?
Suddenly, Elroy looked up and faced Rose. Oh my god, was I actually correct? His eyes were wild and unfocused.
Wait, I haven't lost. Of course I haven't. I just can never lose to the likes of him. I just need to drink more blood, and the likes of Alphonse will never...
His eyes suddenly darted back to Rose's face with terrible intensity. The monstrous grin stretched wide. The next moment, the wound that had been left by Alphonse's slash began to erupt red mist. Red mist? Is that the red mist? Incredible force.
It's...
The mist filled the surrounding area at an alarming rate, and their field of vision was completely obscured by the crimson haze. All that could be heard was Alphonse's voice crying out.
Rose, what's happening?
Stay calm, she ordered. It isn't harmful. The red mist was yet another special ability of vampires, employed only in moments of desperation. The creature would use its own wounds as a kind of smokescreen. Knowing this full well from experience, Rose tried to check Elroy by his scent. It should have been easy. She didn't need to see the vampire to find it, and yet there was nothing. Despite having every reason to believe that he was right in front of her, not a trace of the vampire's trail was to be found. Why? She wondered, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. slowly but surely. Well, thank you so much, Red Max. The red mist began to dispel. When it cleared, only 2 figures remained, Rose and Alphonse. So close! The vampire was nowhere to be seen. Oh, yep, I think I was actually right after all. He's like a lower kindred. Damn it! She cried. Elroy had managed to escape from them, but where? With a wince, Alphonse rose to his feet.
Rose, we can't lose him!
All things considered, it seemed safe to assume that Elroy was searching for more victims to train in order to replenish his own power. Meaning if that they didn't catch him before then, there'd be more fatalities. Not to mention the possibility that he might grow too strong for them to handle. Rose waved Alphonse to silence. Hold on, I'm trying to follow his scent. Though she meant to reassure Alphonse, in her own mind, Rose felt deeply uneasy. How could the trail have just disappeared all of a sudden? She'd never known anything like it. Is my power growing weaker? She wondered to herself. Just as she was pondering potential causes, though, the sense suddenly returned. That fact did nothing to allay her confusion. But as long as there was a trail to follow. Oh my god, thank you, Red Max, so much for the 5. Oh, thank you for the donation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really, that means so much to me. Thank you so much, Red Max. The fact had nothing to allay her confusion. But as long as there was a trail to follow, pursuing it needed to be their top priority. She focused her mind on the odor, trying to ascertain its location. Eventually, she was able to find the answer she sought. The source was startling. It's coming from the direction of that tavern! The Algeria was the only 1 street away from where they stood. Alphonse didn't even spare Rose a glance. He just dashed off to the restaurant, his face a mask of fear. Wait, no. Wait, I could be wrong after all. Was it actually Luca? It could actually be Luca. Into the darkness. Oh boy. Originally, the late hour was the peak of business for Wait a minute. Am I being lisdexic about this? Originally, the late hour was the peak of business for the Allegria Tavern. On any other day, the chairs would be all filled with familiar faces, chattering away and enjoying food and drink. But tonight, not a single seat was taken. So great was the terror of the vampire murders that none dared leave their homes. Left with nothing else to do, Luca had set about cleaning the tavern, but the task was quickly finished. She slouched at the spotless counter, thoroughly bored. There hadn't been any sign of her friend. 30 pages! Oh god, this is a chonker. Oh my god, that day. Still. Considering the rumors she had heard of the Garrard team's nighttime patrols, it wasn't all that surprising. He must really be busy, she thought to herself. Still, she couldn't pretend that she wasn't disappointed by that fact. Thoughts of Alphonse weighing on her mind, she let out a gloomy sigh. The tavern's owner stopped washing cutlery on the other side of the counter and gave her a warm smile. Reminds me of the frickin' guy who worked with Reze.
Go along home for today. Dangerous around these parts lately, so you best getting back.
He called. Just as she went to do so, however, the bell over the door chimed. A customer had entered the tavern. Luca jumped out of her chair in a panic. What she saw made her gasp. Standing in the doorway of the tavern was a young man in a bloodstained soldier's uniform. Letting out a short shriek of horror, she rushed over to the man. The uniform he had on was the same as the one worn by Alphonse, leading her to immediately think it might be him. As she drew closer, though, she realized it wasn't. Relief washed over her. This is gonna be so funny if this is a Reze thing. Let's see. Oh my god. Getting a closer look at his face, Luca was startled to find out that she actually recognized him. A long time ago, when Alphonse had first joined the army, he had brought out the man before her with him to visit the tavern. She remembered hearing the two of them weren't on very good terms anymore, however. His name was Elroy? The tavern's owner hurried with the first aid kit, clearly concerned, but Elroy showed no interest in him. Ooh. No, he's using her as a hostage. His eyes were focused unwaveringly on Luca.
Hello, friend of Alphonse. I'm gonna have to ask you to come with me.
He muttered. His following smile was anything but inviting. By the time Alphonse and Rose arrived, the tavern was in a terrible state. Chairs were strewn everywhere, tables lay in pieces all about the space, and the floor was covered in smashed glass and broken crockery. On the other side of the counter, they found the owner, blood trickling from his temple. Calmly, Rose used the church's thaumaturgy to heal him. Its mysterious power closed his wound, and soon after he regained consciousness. The second he did, Alphonse began to bombard him with questions.
What happened here? Where's Luca?
He couldn't see any sign of her, and that worried him intensely.
A boy in a military uniform came. No, I was no human. It was a monster. I tried to fight him off, but he took Luca.
The moment he uttered Luca's name, he fell unconscious once again. Not long after, the soldiers who had been patrolling the surrounding area heard what had happened and hurried to the scene. The area soon filled with the sounds of people's voices and soldiers running up and down the streets. Even a number of the local residents had woken up and begun to gather to see what was going on. Eventually, Gerard himself arrived and set about questioning the tavern's owner and investigating the scene with a number of his subordinates. Alphonse and Rose, meanwhile, stood in the shadow of a building not far away.
Damn you, Elroy!
Alphonse cried as he punched one of the brick walls with all his might. Nearby, Rose stood with him with her arms folded, deep in thought. Stay calm. We have every reason to believe that Luca is still alive. Elroy had fled to search for new blood to heal his injuries and increase his power. If he was intending to use Luca for that purpose, there was no reason to take her away. It would have been far quicker and easier to just drink her blood in the tavern. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Thus, it was safe to assume that he had a different purpose in mind for her. And the most likely reason seemed to be use her to lure him somewhere. I suspect that I know where he is headed, said Rose. She pointed down at the ground below their feet. During the previous day's encounter with Elroy, he had summoned a large number of ghouls out of seemingly nowhere, each of them victims without families or friends to know their absence. Elroy had been abducting them in secret and storing them somewhere for when he wanted them. And there was every reason to believe there were more. To stash them, he would need quite a sizable area. But it also had to be one where the chance of being found would be quite low. In other words, a place that no one really went. A perfect match for both of those conditions was the network of underground passages beneath the city. The tunnels had been built during the Dark Ages several hundred years prior and were not normally used by people, Somewhere in there, Rose theorized, Elroy was probably waiting for them. Alphonse proposed that they depart immediately. After all, every second they waited increased the danger that Luca was in. Rose, however, stood silently, her eyes cast downwards.
Is something bothering you?
Alphonse asked. Her mouth tightened. Two things, in fact. Firstly, I suspect that Elroy is what is known as an elder vampire. There were, Rose explained, several kinds of vampires. Those who were legitimate descendants of the race were known as true ancestors. Ah, I see. The true ancestors were said to have all perished. Oh yeah, so this is the true ancestors is basically equivalent to first kindred. Okay. But those who were closely related to them were known as elder vampires. And like true ancestors, some elder vampires still remained. Elder vampires were filled with a lust for blood every 10 or so years. And in surrendering themselves to that lust, they have been responsible for countless deaths throughout history. As a vampire hunter, therefore, they were Rose's most important targets. Furthermore, they were apparently among the most powerful vampires, with exceptional growth potential. As an example of this, Rose explained that when Luca first attacked, she'd been guided to a deserted area by a high-level ability called Charm, which allowed these to control the thoughts of their victim to a certain degree. Oh, it's a term borrowed from Tsukihime. Oh, wow. Interesting. Interesting, Amy. Welcome to the stream, by the way. As an example of this, there's a charm, which allowed the user to control the thoughts of the victim to a certain degree. It was finding out that Luca had lost her memories of what happened when she was attacked that had first alerted to Rose the possibility that Elroy might be an elder vampire. And that's what had first led her to try to distance Alphonse from her investigation. The fact that they might be dealing with an elder vampire was only one of her concerns, however. The other was closely related to it. The astonishing power elder vampires possess is amplified even further at night. Because of that, it should be impossible for them to be able to disguise their presence completely. And yet, in the battle against Elroy earlier, he'd been able to do just that, allowing him to make his escape. It so surprised Rose that she had missed her chance to finish him off. It's possible that he's no ordinary elder vampire, or perhaps he's something even more terrifying, she mused aloud. They had no way of telling what Elroy was truly capable of, or even what he truly was. As such, it was impossible to gauge how much danger they would be putting themselves in by following him. Especially knowing that they'd be walking right into a trap. While she had no choice but to follow, she found herself questioning whether bringing Alphonse along would be a really good idea. The reservation must have been plain on her face, because Alphonse cut off her thoughts with a determined shake of the head.
Rose, I've already told you I'm not going to die. I won't let you be alone ever again. I don't care how strong our opponent is. I'm not going to go back on my word.
The resolve was clear and unwavering in his eyes. With or without her blessing, he would see it through to the end. He could not, would not, abandon someone living a life of solitude like he once did. The pure innocence of that emotion and empathy was enough to recall her own bleak loneliness. The dark feelings passed over her features like a cloud obscuring the stars. There was, after all, one other secret she had yet to part with. Oh, I bet it's that like she's like half vampire. Or something like that. And that, more than anything, was the cause of her solitude. Or she could be a true ancestor. It looks like true ancestors are able to control their bloodlust. The warmth of his words almost coaxed it from her lips. So moved was she. But now wasn't the time. For the moment, his heartfelt declaration was enough for her. Their priority needed to be saving his friend. Everything else could wait. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought I'd overcome my hesitations, but it seems that wasn't the case." With a mental shake of the head, she pushed her doubts deep within and slowly moved her hand downward toward her waist. Her fingers sought out her spare blade, an elegant longsword. Unclipping it from her belt, she handed it to Alphonse. "This should serve as a replacement for that broken saber. I imagine you'll be able to fight more comfortably with this." Alphonse hefted it in his hand, admiring the balance. He slipped it her hands out of the scabbard for a closer look. Like Rose's other purified weapons, it had a silvery glow that seemed to suck in the light of the red moon. A blow from a blade like this would surely stop a vampire in its tracks. Rose had always known that the short sword she had given Alphonse was hardly the ideal weapon for him. She had done this deliberately, hoping that having an unsuitable weapon would dissuade him from trying to get actively involved in battle. And yet, not once had he balked at entering the fray. With whatever resources he had at his disposal, Alphonse was always ready to jump in. Giving him the longsword, therefore, was a sign that she now regarded him as someone worthy of trust, and an apology for underestimating him previously. Alphonse acknowledged the gift, and perhaps apology, with a nod of the head, and attached the blade to a sturdy leather baldric. They regarded one another for a moment, and then swore to do what needed to be done. Their mutual resolve reaffirmed, they took off in the deep darkness where Luca and the vampire waited. Next to Heimdall, there flowed a great river known as the Anor. Facing out onto it was Heimdall Port, and on the one corner of that port was a door that led down into an underground passage. Hey, we were there! We were there! The entrance was usually locked for safety reasons, but they forced it in without much trouble and stepped inside. The air within was a mixture of mold, rusting metal, and a pervasive smell of damp. Cautiously, they moved along the slick stone path, ears and eyes strained for any movement. The tunnel was connected to the river itself, and torpid water flowed all the way into the deep darkness further along the passage. It had been constructed during the Dark Ages, and the network of passages into the city was so vast that no one knew just how far it stretched, or exactly what lay within it. The entire area had been long abandoned. No maintenance or modernization had ever been done. To Alphonse's eye, it looked as though they were setting foot in some ancient labyrinth, untouched by time or man for hundreds of years. They proceeded deeper inside, following Elva's trail along the waterway, with only the faintest of light from the red moon trickling through the periodic grates to illuminate their path. The scent coming from him had returned in full force, filling the air with tension as they drew closer and closer to their quarry. They proceeded cautiously, and more slowly now, even as the light from the moon eventually abandoned them during their descent. The pitch darkness did not last for long, however. As they advanced, they soon started to come across torches here and there, attached at intervals along the wall. The glow from the flickering light was both inviting and sinister.
It looks like he really has been using this place as a hideout for quite a while,
Alphonse commented. He and others, Rose thought with distaste. It seemed very likely that the people Elroy had abducted were somewhere around too. No sooner had the thought crossed her mind than she sensed movement. She sighed. Oh no! It looks as though we're too late. Oh god, he regenerated back to full power. The meaning of Rose's words soon became clear. Slowly but surely, a number of figures drew closer to them from ahead. They shuffled and jerked with unusual cadence. Ghouls. It's a thriller, in up. While Elroy had abducted Luca without drinking her blood, it seemed as though he had used the other people he had been keeping here in her place. Alphonse could not but feel a slight sense of relief when he noticed that Luca wasn't among them, but that didn't prove for certain that she was still unharmed. After all Elroy needed to do to get them to chase him after him was to have them believe that there was a chance that she was still alive. But yeah, looks like I was completely wrong about the fucking dude. Fucking hell, man. God. I will say, I really like the story. I think they made the Elroy thing a bit too obvious. with the arm bandage. Like, it was so obvious, I really thought it was red herring. As the creatures approached, it was clear that they had no time to waste. Alphonse quickly drew the longsword, while Rose had already her Templar sword and pistol in hand, ready for battle. We need to deal with these first!
Right.
Their course of action decided, they both charged the horde of advancing ghouls. It was the first time that Alphonse had been forced to engage in actual combat with ghouls, and he found it emotionally draining. After all, the ghouls were nothing more than victims of the vampire. They hadn't chosen to have their lives taken, or to be compelled to seek to devour their fellows. It had all been forced upon them. As such, he was not fighting to kill them, but to free them. Thinking of it logically didn't do much to reduce the pain of taking up arms against another human being, though. I mean, you gotta think of them as zombies. They're dead. It's just their corpse is being puppeted. His heart ached every time he cut one down. Rose, meanwhile, was mowing down ghouls like a scythe through the summer harvest. There were nothing more than obstacles in her way, and their shambling attacks were no match for peerless work with the blade. Oh, the police are coming after the vampire. Oh my god. No matter the speed and skill with which she dispatched them, though, more ghouls emerged from the darkness to block her path. Watching her, Alphonse couldn't help but wonder how long she'd been enduring the same pain that he was feeling now. It didn't show on her face, but he remembered the tenderness with which she had handled the ghoul after defeating it on their first meeting. She was as disgusted as he was with their plight. He wanted to know what had driven her to continue subjecting herself to that pain over and over again. What had driven her to the depths of solitude. But most of all, he wanted to find some way that he could be of help to her. Right now, however, all that he could do was for her to continue the fight. Shoving down the sorrow he felt with every swing of the sword that met flesh, he kept advancing forward through the massive bodies before him. There's two endings I can see to this story. In one, Alphonse is almost killed, and if Rose is a true ancestor, she makes him a vampire to survive, but he's dead to the world, and they're companions forever. In the other one, Rose dies, sacrifices herself to save Alphonse. And those are the two endings I see to this. Let's see if either of them are correct. Using the torches on the walls as their beacons, Alphonse and Rose hurried as best they could through the maze of passages. Dozens upon dozens of ghouls obstructed their path, but they continued to carve their way forward. They advanced, but slowly, each battle taking a toll on their stamina and energy. Eventually, the path ahead of them opened, and they found themselves in a wide, spacious area. The ground here was gray and soft beneath their feet. It was earth, not stone. A number of crosses were lined up in tidy rows in the sweeping space, probably erected during the Dark Ages. Their bindings looked so weathered that they could have crumbled to the ground at any moment. The area was lit only by a few sputtering torches, but it was enough to see that they must be in a catacomb of some sort. The atmosphere in the subterranean tomb was even gloomier than it had been in the passages they had passed through to reach it. At its center stood a single silent man, wearing a black coat over his tattered army uniform. Alphonse had been leaning exhaustedly against Rose after their seemingly endless battles with the ghouls. But when he spied that familiar figure, he let out a mighty yell.
Elroy!
His voice boomed through the chamber, but the other man didn't flinch in the slightest. Instead, he calmly turned to face them. The air grew heavy with malevolence.
I've been expecting you,
he said. Smiling, he regarded them with amusement. As his lips crept farther and farther up, his needle-sharp fangs were slowly revealed. They were stained a deep, wet red. All right! Oh boy, we have 4 chapters left. Damn, another chonker here. Holy shit! I just want to see how many pages the rest of them are. 28, 31, 17, and 21. Okay, so so the 11 and 12 are the longest. Okay. And then it's like at some kind of reasonable length for chapter 13 and the finale. Jesus Christ. All right, let's keep going. My God, this is going to be the whole stream. At the very least. Chapter 11, Battle in the Catacomb. Watching Elroy turn, Rose knew with a sinking feeling that he had fully recovered from their previous battle. It was also obvious that he was much, much stronger, considering how much blood he must have drunk to spawn all the ghouls they had fought on their way to reach him. It was hardly surprising, though. Nonetheless, neither Alphonse nor Rose had any way of telling exactly how powerful the monster before them had become.
Where's Luca?
Alphonse shouted. The vampire shrugged his support.
Who knows? Maybe I'll tell you if you beat me.
He slowly raised his arms, then stretched them toward the heavens. An incredible wave of power erupted from his palms. Oh God, energy blast, reverberating throughout the catacomb. Alphonse and Rose tensed, but the rush of energy suddenly stopped.
What was that?
Alphonse asked cautiously. No! Cried Rose. Though the discharge of power had no immediate visible effect, she knew it was coming. Her grip on her sword tightened. A strange crumping sound filled the air, like vast unseen movement. Is he summoning something? Alphonse's eyes darted over the area trying to find the source of the noise. Neither one of the crosses he had noticed earlier. Something white. Near one of the crosses he noticed something white caught his eye. It was a skeletal human hand. Ah! He summoned the skeletons! Skeletons are way weaker than ghouls, man. It was a skeletal human hand. With a start, he realized that similar grasping fingers and limbs were emerging from other graves surrounding them. The twitching bones were pushing and clawing at the dirt. Not long after, the bodies they belonged to began to heave their weight out of the ground as well. The air was full of the crackling and clicking of bones and musty soil. There were the cadaverous. remains of those who had been buried long ago. These were the cadaverous remains. It seemed the skill to wake and manipulate the corpses of the dead was yet another ability in an elder vampire's repertoire. Their new undead foes presented another problem. Unlike the ghouls, skeletons were equipped with varying weapons and equipment. Oh, I can't. Never mind. They're skeletons wearing armor. Okay, that changes things. Some had axes and other swords, while many wore helmets and several had shields. Judging from all the armament on display, it seems safe to assume that those who were buried in this particular catacomb had been warriors of those who had fallen in battle. Yeah, armored skeletons are hard. Alphonse drew his sword, his back against Rose's. They're completely surrounded.
What incredible power!
Elroy's shriek of laughter cut like a knife through the shuffling of wizard feet and creaking of rotten leather. His expression was suffused with ecstasy as he surveyed his handiwork. Once freed of their earthen graves, skeletons stood completely still. Unlike the ghouls who operated entirely on the instinctive desire planted within them, the skeletons were soldiers in the truest sense of the word. They awaited the command of the vampire who had woken them from their eternal slumber. With a sweeping cut of his hand, Elroy gave the signal to attack. The skeletons surged forward en masse toward Alphonse and Rose like a wave cresting the shoreline. Each of them held their weapons out at the ready, but there were simply too many of them to block them all. Just before the undead army reached them, Alphonse felt Rose tap his shoulder from behind. Instantly understanding what she was trying to tell him, he swiftly crouched to the ground. As Alphonse ducked, Rose jumped high in the air. She twisted the upper half of her body, her right arm stretched out over the left side of her torso. With a powerful swipe, she swung that arm back to the right, her body making an almost full rotation. The motion lent even greater power to her swing as she whipped her Templar sword around like in a scything arc. Damn, what is that craft? The heads of the closest skeletons exploded into a fine white powder as the segmented blades made contact. The sheer force behind the blow also blasted back the second row of skeletons, giving the pair precious breathing space. Not letting the opening go to waste, Alphonse leaped up from the ground and charged forward through the sea of bones toward the vampire. Some skeletons tried to oppose his advance, but he simply bashed them aside, slashing, kicking, punching, and otherwise doing whatever he had in order to remove them from his path. It was ugly but effective. Elver was nearly within his reach. Skeletons still be skeletons, I guess. Even if they're armored. It's among the weakest minions you can possibly have. Rose, meanwhile, was doing all she could to draw the skeleton's attention, switching rapidly between using her sword and pistols. She also did her best to cover Alphonse from afar, attacking enemies bearing down on him from behind.
Why, Elroy? What happened to you?
Alphonse cried out over the clamor of battle as he smashed his way through the legion of skeletons. He couldn't help but wonder how the two of them had come to this point to begin with. They had first met several years before when Alphonse joined the Imperial Army. Elroy had been an orphan who lived in poverty before being scouted out for the military by Gerard. No, I'm not going to go back to that every time something happens. Nope, I'm not going to go back to that every time something fucking happens. Nope, it's not Gerard, it's just fucking Elroy. And if a true ancestor is behind them, it might very well be Rose or someone related to her, and she's like fixing her mistakes, or whatever. I don't know. Elroy had been an orphan who lived in poverty before being scouted out for the military by Gerard, and his exceptional skill with the sword. As such, the two of them shared a lot in common. While Elroy didn't even know who his parents were, they were both orphans, and they were both saved from solitude by Gerard. They soon felt an affinity towards one another, becoming good rivals and aiding each other in improving their skills. Yet at some point after that, their relationship took a turn for the worse. Even so, Alphonse still saw Elroy as a comrade and respected his strength and skill. No matter how many times Elroy acted unpleasantly or coldly toward him, that feeling never changed for him. And that was why even now, after all he had seen and done, he still couldn't bring himself to believe that Elroy was a vampire. That Elroy, someone he had practically grown up with, someone was someone who could heartlessly take the lives of innocent people or toy with them as food. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally dispatched the last skeleton standing between him and Elroy. His path was clear. He raced toward the vampire, silver sword held high and a war cry erupting from his lips. Watching him with undisguised amusement, Elroy smoothly drew his own blade. Once again, their swords locked together in opposition.
I won't let you hurt anyone else. As a friend, I can't allow you to. Don't you give me that.
Bye, Red Max. Thank you so much for coming. Elroy blocked Alphonse's attack with a contemptuous swipe of his own sword, held effortlessly in one hand. He then repelled Alphonse's blade with incredible force. Alphonse's arm was knocked back, but he turned to his advantage and used the momentum from Elroy's attack to spin around and attack him with a sweeping horizontal slash. Again, Elroy rebuffed him, this time employing but a single finger. The dishit was burned by the blade, but though it smoked, Elroy didn't show the faintest sign of concern. Instead, he began to focus his strength into it, causing the sword to begin to crack. Alphonse looked up with gritted teeth, expecting to see the familiar superior sneer on Elroy's face, but instead of a glimpse of a man assured of his own victories, only saw pure hatred. The look was so intense that he almost faltered.
Friend. How dare you call yourself my friend? Have you tried to see what matters most to me?
Oh god, Elroy was in love with Luca. Oh my god. Dang. Elroy's words caught Alphonse so off guard that he wasn't able to react in time to parry the downward throw from Elroy's sword. The blade made contact, slicing through Alphonse's garden uniform from shoulder to navel. Blood sprayed in the wake of the slash and he held in pain. Hearing his cry, Rose called out in concern. The path he had carved to Elroy, however, had long since filled with skeletons she was diverting, and Alphonse knew he could expect no help from that quarter. Fortunately, the wound was fairly shallow. As to demonstrate his fitness, he nimbly retreated backwards and raised the sword again.
What are you talking about? I don't remember taking anything from you. Silence. Your chance to repent has long since passed.
Elroy renewed his attack with relentless force. Alphonse tried valiantly to resist, but his injury impaired him from fighting to his full potential, and Elroy managed to land one slash after another. Blood began to soak through his shirt. Though all superficial, the number of wounds on his body increased steadily, and he began to feel lightheaded. Nonetheless, he raised the sword yet again, but only pure willpower kept the blade from wavering. Elroy watched this display with glee, his mouth quirked up in a smile of anticipated victory.
Don't worry, you won't be alone for long. The vampire hunter and the girl from the tavern will be joining you very soon.
Wait, so does he not like Luca? So what the fuck is he talking about? Alphonse trembled at the promise in those words, but they also filled him with renewed determination.
Elroy, I don't know what you've got against me, but no matter what it is, I'm not going to let you kill me. I'm not going to go back on my promise. What are you talking about?
Elroy asked, the smile slipping from his face.
You think you can kill me? Go right and try, because I'm not going to die. And I will stop you.
Enough!
Enraged, Elroy finally clasped his sword in both hands. Fury and monstrous energy radiated from him in waves. Alphonse knew that this would be his strongest attack yet.
You're finished.
Elroy cried, swinging his sword downward with all of his might. Death approached from above, and Alphonse saw it coming, but he made no move to block it. His silver sword still remains in front of him. He took Elroy's attack head on. Oh shit. Uh-oh. It looks like the Alphonse vampire ending might be the ending. Oh boy. Once again, the vampire's blade made contact with Alphonse's left shoulder, cleaving through body, muscle, bone, and all. Or at least, that was what he expected to happen.
What?
What happened next defied all logic, as the sword carried downward it sheared through Alphonse's left collarbone, then stopped. Trembling with effort, Alphonse looked Elroy straight in the eye, and it was not the look of a man who'd been bested. Alphonse hadn't decided to not defend against Elroy's attack. Instead, he had resolved to receive it. Oh shit. And focus his concentration to its limit. Ah, the old free run technique. The moment the blade entered his body, he had suddenly stiffened all of his muscles, thus allowing him to halt the sword's advance. Elroy was stunned by what had happened. He just fucking tanked it. The outcome was just so far removed from the victory he had envisioned, they could only gape at the other man. And it was that shock that Alphonse had been counting on. It was the opening he had so desperately created.
Ah!
Ignoring the pain surging through his body, Alphonse prepared his strike. Elroy released his own sword's hilt, unable to free the blade embedded in Alphonse's shoulder. He took half a step back, weaponless, defenseless. The tip of Alphonse's silver sword flew forwards, piercing the vampire straight through the chest. Dang. Okay. I didn't expect him to die this chapter. As it sank deep and true, the catacomb fell silent. With a dry sound almost like a sigh, the skeletons Rose had been finding crumbled to the ground. Finally, free from the need to fight against them any longer, she stopped and turned to Alphonse. She watched in mute astonishment as Alphonse withdrew his sword from the vampire's chest. Elroy dropped to his knees and then collapsed. His enemy defeated, Alphonse then turns his attention to himself. With clenched teeth, he pulled out the sword that had been embedded in his left shoulder. Oof, here we go. Blood spurted in a bright arc as he freed it. He tried to stop the bleeding by holding his hand over it, but the wound was just too deep. Blood continued to flow out between his fingers.
Maybe I overdid it a little,
he said a bit unsteadily. Rose sighed. You truly are unbelievable. She picked her way over to him, carefully sidestepping bones and weapons in her path. Gently, she placed a hand over his, and Alphonse felt a warm sensation suffuse his body. She was using her thaumaturgy to heal his injuries. Oh, okay, so he's not going to become a vampire. Alright. You only have one life, she chided him. You shouldn't treat it so carelessly. I always knew they were foolish. Perhaps foolish, idiotic, imbecile is more appropriate. Despite the admonishing tone of her words, Alphonse could tell from her face just how relieved she was that he was all right. Feeling somewhat guilty for worrying her so much, he watched as his wound rapidly began to close. While her thaumaturgy can only heal physical wounds and not restore his lost stamina, it was still more than sufficient as first aid. Suddenly, they heard a soft groaning sound from nearby. Oh, he's not dead yet! Does he have like one final gambit? It had come from Elroy, who was looking up at the ceiling with a vacant expression. His skin had begun to crack and slowly crumble away. He seemed to be trying to say something, but his voice was so quiet that it was impossible to make out what. Rose slowly drew one of her silver pistols and pointed it at Elroy's head. Alphonse startled.
What are you?
His fate is sealed, regardless. But I can't allow him to pass like this. There wasn't a moment to waste. As a vampire hunter, she had a duty to finish off her targets. To Alphonse, her decision seemed heartless, but he also knew that she had no choice. He was still frustrated that it had to end like this. Like, what? How was Elroy jealous of Alphonse? Like, I don't understand. If it wasn't about Luca, he still had a lot of questions that he wanted to ask Elroy. Had he been a vampire the whole of the time they had known each other? What had driven him to start taking the lives of innocents now? And why did he hate him so much? Nonetheless, he knew that vampires were simply too dangerous to be allowed to exist. As such, he stood by silently, allowing her to do what she thought she had to be done. But Rose simply stood with her pistol pointed at Elroy's head, never pulling its trigger. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, last minute plot twist, here we go. This doesn't make any sense, she murmured. Alphonse looked at her.
What doesn't?
I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
There was puzzlement and not a bit of wariness in Rose's reply. There's no scent. None at all.
Scent of what?
The scent of an elder vampire. What? No fucking way. Alright. Is it Luca? Or fucking I forgot his name. Garrison? Garadeb? Something like that. Garon? Garion? God damn it. I forgot what exactly his name was. At that moment, something flew at incredible speed through the darkness. Two long, narrow objects made of filthy black blood flashed toward them in a blur. Rose, who sensed their approach first, immediately pushed Alphonse out of the way. As he was thrust in the path of the objects, Alphonse watched horror as the sharply pointed lances of blood mercilessly pierced Rose's chest. God damn it! Rose gets taken out in the final battle. Fuck me. He fell to the ground with a whump. And a moment later, Rose thudded down beside him. Blood began to pool around her inert body. Oh shit. Okay, so it might be the other ending. Alphonse couldn't process what was happening, nor was able to rise to his feet. So weak was he from his earlier battle. I don't know what voice to use! Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You've gotta be fucking kidding me! Oh my god. How many times has this happened?
Well,
Said a voice.
I certainly couldn't have seen that coming. I was hoping to finish you off both at the same time.
Out of the darkness that the lances had emerged from stepped a figure. A figure whose outline and great gait was achingly familiar. A man in a military uniform who knew better than anyone else.
Looks like you managed to cheat death again. Oh. Garrod.
He didn't want to believe what he was seeing. Oh my god! Elder Vampire! Oh my fucking god! I can't think of a better cliffhanger than that. Fuck me! God fucking damn it. Next time we have a long stream. We're gonna have a longer stream. We'll be able to finish this and do the fucking dungeon. And oh my god. How many times has this fucking happened? I swear. Alright, you guys. This has been an incredible story. Wowzers. Oh my god. Next time, we will have the finale of Red Moon Rose. One thing's for sure, in future books in the series, I will read the chapters as they come. Oh, because I did not expect the books to suddenly like triple in length. So, oh my god. Oh my god. So yeah, we'll read the last of that book, which should, I don't know, take like maybe 40 minutes, and then we'll do the dungeon. We'll probably stop right before the dungeon boss next time, but until then, I will say, so long, farewell, Alfreda saying goodnight. You're all the sweetest of hearts. See ya.